appreciation and understanding of a particular art medium. What does it mean? Well, actually, let's find out ourselves from a man who is an artist, and his art and his tool is the guitar. Barney Kessel, many people are perplexed to present all kinds of programs, from symphonic to jazz, from art shows to Broadway theaters. The in-person idea, the communication of the artist from the stage. What is the symbol of your art, the guitar? What does it mean to you?
Well, Leigh, the guitar means many things. It doesn't mean the same thing to me now as it did when I was a youngster. When I was a youngster, actually I received a lot of satisfaction from simply learning very rich, lush chords with very rich, lush harmony, and I would just play these over and over when I was about a youngster of about 12 years old, and I would sort of conjure up all sorts of thoughts about being in strange countries and strange lands, strange customs, just through the association of these particular harmonies with perhaps some motion picture I had seen that had similar harmonies. And I got a lot of pleasure out of just playing these chords over and over and just sort of daydreaming while I was playing them.
What does the guitar mean to you today?
Today, well, it's a means of expression. It's a mechanical piece of wood and strings. To me, it looks beautiful and all that, but it's a means of getting out an idea that I have in my mind. It's conveying the idea in my mind through the medium of the guitar.
Can this be compared to the artist with his brush, his paints, and his canvas?
I think so, very much so.
Does an artist look at these particular implements as tools?
Well, I think that he does. It's nice to have maybe some sentiment for an instrument. I know there are musicians that very fondly speak of their instruments or even pat them affectionately or even name them or take care of them like that. And I love the instrument that I have today, but I am not sentimental about it at all. For instance, if someone showed me an instrument that was much superior to mine, I would drop mine in a minute and take the new one.
But actually, what you play, what you have to say is the important thing.
That's right.
How would you express that? What you have to say as a musician?
Well, I think that what a person really has to say is what they genuinely feel about it, and not what seems to be the vogue of the moment or what they think that by saying will make them liked or make them successful or rich. I think that when a person sits down and plays, it can be much like a conversation. In other words, I like to think of my quartet when we play that we're engaged in a musical conversation, just like there would be four people sitting at a table having a discussion. And if we just simply say and make polite chit-chat or play things that are the trend for the moment, then we don't have much originality. I think that in jazz, in order to become great, in order to cut a niche for yourself, that you really have to be original. You have to have belief in what you're doing, and you have to play it with conviction.
In other words, the guitar today symbolizes a means of communication for you.
For me.
And a way of speaking or relating to other people.
That's right.
This certainly is a most revealing idea. Barney Kessel is our guest, and it's a kind of appreciation and understanding session. And really, it's a privilege to have someone with insight and understanding to help focus our ear on the things that we listen to, particularly the idiom of jazz. A kind of international language, we might add, and for a spokesman in the language of English and also the symbols of the notes on the paper, let's find out. What is jazz, Barney Kessel? If someone dares to ask this question, all kinds of chain reactions result. What happens in your mind?
Well, Leigh, I can only tell you what jazz is for me. Jazz, to me, is a very unique and beautiful thing. It is a means for a musician to express himself. It's the only means that I know of where a musician can really express himself, because he plays his own ideas. And in order to do that, he has to reach a point where he is so equipped, so well equipped musically, that he bypasses all concern for wondering what fingering to use, what string to use, what picking to use, what note it is. He has reached a point where he has such command of his instrument that once he thinks of an idea, he can play it immediately. Keys being no problem, tempos being no problem. he is as free to play what he hears as if he were speaking and wanted to think of what he was going to say and could instantly speak it, to have that much command over the instrument. And so to me, jazz is simply a means of expressing yourself musically.
Is this in any way a comparison? A writer who is well trained sometimes struggles, though, to create just one page of narrative or dialogue for a novel. But eventually, if his discipline is such, he has developed and formulated his ideas, and sometimes it rolls off a typewriter with the same ease, perhaps, as the notes come off your guitar.
I think they could be compared. The main thing is when we start talking about degrees of jazz, degrees of how good it is and how authentic it is. It's so hard for any one person to judge, because in each person's mind, they listen to something and they say, that's good jazz. It is by their own standards. To me, the big thing in jazz is, first of all, first and always, it must swing. Even if it's a ballad, it must have that fire, it must have that spark. Even if it's a beautiful ballad, it must really live, it must come alive. It must be so vibrant that if you and I are engaged in a conversation and someone is all of a sudden starts playing, and they play with great love and authority, that we have to stop our conversation to listen. If it doesn't command us to do this, then it isn't that good. If we can still keep right on talking while it's going on, then it isn't that good.
What is the degree of emotional element in something like this, as, say, versus the discipline of the musician who has so completely mastered his art that he doesn't have to think about some of the important things, technique, for example?
Well, I think that the emotion is everything in it. I think that the emotional content is everything in it, because when we listen, we can't appreciate whether a person is using very difficult means of arriving at this thing, or if he studied for many years with a particular teacher, or he's working under a great handicap. We can only digest the end result. If it comes out right, it's got to be right.
Examination and appreciation of this word and this medium called jazz. So many times you hear a conversation out in the audience that goes something like this. Oh, that man's real cool. Or, isn't he great? Something to that effect. That might be the conversation. What are the qualities, what are the differences that make an artist in the field of jazz? I suppose as in symphony, too. A soloist or a performer, really great. Barney Kessel, I'm sure you can help us with that.
Well, I can try. In my own opinion, Leigh, I would say, first of all, that the word great is very much overused in show business, and genius is too. They are used to such a great extent that we're going to have to find another word. But
we might have to get rid of superlatives, though.
We may, yes, we may. But many times, great stress is put on someone. They use the word great in describing someone who has a very good grasp of the particular trend that's going now. For instance, someone that might play, they say that man is great on tenor, meaning that he plays a lot of tenor, meaning that he can play all of the different styles that are going today. He knows all of the cliches. He knows all of the current licks and patterns that are being played today. To me, great is not so much having the ability to encompass everything that's going on, but it's the ability to be able to be original and creative.
And this, of course, is the most difficult test.
That's right.
Well, now, what makes a man really a fresh, original kind of performer? Is there any essential identification or measure for it?
Well, usually it's out of frustration that creation usually grows. The desire to find a place for themselves, a desire not to bask in the sun as being called a second so-and-so or another so-and-so. They want to find their own niche, and so they start out. Sometimes their first feeble attempts are not as eloquently stated as their predecessors, but as they continue on, they finally find a place for themselves, and they have much more chance of finally arriving at a place where they are considered great if they are original.
A moment or so ago, in fact it might have been hours ago, Barney Kessel and I were talking about what are the qualities, the differences that make a musician great. Briefly, Barney Kessel is known from coast to coast and overseas as one of the internationally fine guitarists and craftsmen in his field. For him, there were influences. Barney Kessel, we talked about what the qualities and differences were that made a musician above average, stand out. If I mention Django Reinhardt to you, what do you say?
Well, I would say he was a great artist, very great artist.
What about his roots in, say, European folk music?
Well,
Does that mean anything to you, or would you rather just reject that?
no, I would say that he definitely had roots in European folk music. He was a gypsy, and he was certainly exposed to much of the Romanian and possibly Hungarian, lots of the gypsy music that they had at that time, and that's probably where he got his technique, learning to play the guitar.
Do you think he had a feeling for the blues?
Yes, I definitely do.
Which is a rather strange thing, yet blues speak an international language.
Yes,
They
it
might be
does.
an Irish lament, or a
That's
Palestinian folk song, or perhaps
It's a
something
mood.
else.
It's a wail. It's a thing that bespeaks a time in people's lives when they're undergoing some great situation that they have to hurdle.
What does the name Charlie Christian bring to mind?
Well,
The
it brings to
guitarist of
mind
Benny
some
Goodman's
very
group.
happy music, for one thing. He, too, was quite an innovator in that while not being the first one who ever played an electric guitar, he was the first man, in my estimation, who had the ability to raise the level of the guitar to the point where it would be considered a jazz voice, so that a guitarist could take a rightful place along with other great horn players of that particular period, such as Bunny Berrigan and Louis Armstrong and Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw. And I feel that before Charlie Christian, there were good guitar players, but they were only good as guitar players.
In a rhythm section.
In a rhythm section, and they would say so-and-so he's good for a guitar player. But when Charlie Christian came along, he raised the standards so that the guitarist, namely Charlie Christian, could take his rightful place along with all of these other horn players.
On the other side, beyond the realm of jazz and the roots of the blues, the name Andres Segovia comes to mind. And what does that suggest to you?
Well, this suggests much musical pleasure in hearing his many records, and profound admiration for a great master and for a man who has really been dedicated all of his life to playing the guitar and enlarging the scope of the music available for it. Truly a great man. I mean, a man that many hundreds of years from now they will still be reading about and wishing that he had lived in their era.
If you don't mind, we'd like to invite you to sit in and listen to something. It's a treasure from out of the past, and I think the dateline on this particular number is 1939. I'm right. In fact, it's June 30th, if you care to remember dates like that. And Barney Kessel, if you and I were to walk over to the turntable here and put on this number called Nagin, featuring Django Reinhardt in a solo, I think you could help us appreciate it to its greatest depth if you could make a few notes personally about it.
All right.
You've heard the record?
Yes.
All right. Well, what will we hear, although our ear is not quite tuned like yours, perhaps for pitch and tone and things like that, but primarily, what are we going to listen to?
Well, I think that this is just a rare moment in Django's life when he was simply sitting at the guitar and sort of musing. I think that would be the word. There's nothing really staggering or profound, but I think for 1939, and considering the fact that this man was handicapped by only having 3 fingers that he could use on the guitar, and the fact that he was not subject to being influenced by American music, living in Europe and not hearing too much, and not having LPs and not having television and all of these means of exposure, I think that when we sit and listen to this man and think that it's 1939, that my reaction is that, first of all, it was delightful to listen to, and it shows that this man is constantly exploring. He's looking for new sounds and new ways of expressing himself, and I don't think that this is really representative of what we would call Django Reinhardt, but I think it's interesting because it shows a different aspect of him.
Here in America, Barney Kessel, and overseas in time and space, if we were to turn the clock back, Django Reinhardt. a listening session here on KSTP Radio, which bridges time and space, and aiding us bridge that long gap of time and space, Barney Kessel. Barney, this next one coming up features Django Reinhardt, and it's titled Nuage, and I think it's been also retitled in English, The Bluest Kind of Blues. Is this a typical Django Reinhardt recording in your estimation?
I think so. It's to me, it typifies him. It sounds like Django, even if someone else were playing it. I've heard it played by other people, and even on other instruments. And I forget for the moment everything except I think of Django. It just reminds me of him. It's just that type of a song, and it the way he plays it with very great feeling.
What do you think is the tone and atmosphere of Nuage or Bluest Kind of Blues?
Well, it sounds to me, of course, I
well, you have
wonder
a good
lot.
imagination.
Well, it sounds to me like I can just see him playing in an after-hours spot somewhere in Paris or not too far from there, or maybe even in his home, Fontainebleau, and maybe in the very late hours, and just playing maybe just with the piano, and maybe the bass player has fallen asleep and the drummer has gone out in the back to have some wine or something, and it's just an early hours type of thing, and it just bespeaks of a man that he's only concerned with music and only concerned with playing, and that's the way Django was. So many stories about him, so interesting that I couldn't even go into them all, but he knew nothing of withholding tax and Social Security and all of these things. He simply played the guitar.
And this was his life.
That's right.
The art of good listening. Well, in America, sometimes that's a problem. We have a noise level that's a good deal different from Europe, I should say. And the difference between it is, well, the kind of music you hear sometimes, or the kind of personality who plays the music and transmits the art. The art of Andres Segovia? What of that? Barney Kessel is here. Barney, Andres Segovia is classified as, I guess, the epitome of the art of the guitar in classical music.
I would say so, yes.
Is there something you'd like to recommend that we can listen to, and maybe you have a favorite among works of Andres Segovia from this album right here, The Art of Andres Segovia?
Well, there is one here called The Art of Andres Segovia. It's Decca Gold Label Series DL 9795, and there is a cut from this LP, band number 5, Dance from Venezuela by Laro, and I love this piece because I love the music itself. I love the way he plays it. It is so difficult, and yet he doesn't seem to flaunt the technique at you. It just comes out so graceful and so masterful that it's really a joy. And he gives the illusion of having more than one guitar, and he does this without multiple devices or anything. It's just sheer artistry. It's a beautiful thing, and I think that, as I say, it is very technical, but I'm more amazed just at the coordination that he has, and I would say that if I were to listen to any one band on this particular LP, that this would be the one that would sort of show someone what you can do with a guitar.
In line with our Society for the Appreciation and Understanding of Jazz, Vice President Barney Kessel, we'd like to swear you the listener in. And the only thing that you have to have is some time to listen in this busy world of ours, and a chance maybe to put your feet up and relax. Barney Kessel, I understand we're going to explore the area of Bizet and Kamman, which is a colorful opera, which, of course, some of the critics in early times, I guess, shredded, because they said this was not Bizet's best, but I'm not sure of that. However, I don't think that's important. The fact is that you chose this music to play brings up a question. Why did you choose it?
Well, for several reasons. For one, my company, and namely the head of the company, Lester Koenig of Contemporary Records, thought that it would be a very good vehicle to explore. He thought that it would be something that I could take and write up in a sort of jazz manner, and that it would be stimulating to play and interesting and a different approach. He thought that there is no reason why, if we take musical comedies, if we take show tunes, and we take old nostalgic songs of the 20s and dress them up with new harmonies and a new twist, that there would be no reason why we couldn't take some opera. And when we started looking around, why Kamman was a natural, because for one thing, it seems to convey the idea of Spain very definitely, and Spain is related to the guitar, and the guitar is related to me, and I'm related to it, and it just all seemed like a good idea to do, plus the fact that once I started listening to the songs, I realized that there would be many, many of those songs that would lend themselves to jazz adaptations, and I got very excited about doing it.
What happened to some of the harmonies in their original form? Could you say in so many words for some of us laymen?
What happened to them?
Yes. Did you turn them inside out?
Well, I'll
invert
tell
them?
you, I have a very healthy respect for the original version of this opera, and all I wanted to do was, as I explained in the notes, is I wanted it to definitely not lose the flavor of Bizet, but at the same time I wanted to insert my own personality into it, and this I have tried to do, and this I feel that I have done, so that when they listen to it, they never forget that it is Kamman, but they still realize that someone sort of got his 2 cents in.
I noticed the titles on some of the themes, as translated from the original, are hilarious.
This, again, was the work of the president of the company, Lester Caney. He felt that inasmuch as we were doing a modern jazz version, that they should have modern titles.
It's about time to, what should we say? Is there a curtain in this particular performance? Will it raise and reveal actors and players?
This, I don't know. It definitely will. However, I must say that the music in the LP does not appear in the order that it appears in the opera, but rather it appears in a manner that would make a better listening program for a listener of modern jazz.
Well, I do say this. We'll not issue any program notes as such to confuse the lovers of the original.
Fine.
The program will continue, and the curtain will go up on Bizet's Kamman, which is full of exciting things, including bulls, lovers, and what else? It's Barney Kessel night, and a chance to sit in with Barney Kessel and ask him some wonderful things. That is, they're wonderful in this sense of the word. First of all, the fact that he's right here, and that we're sitting in front of his guitar, and that we get a chance to speak to the musician personally in behalf of you, the listener. I know a wonderful song by Billie Holiday called Easy Living, and I'd like very much to hear you play it, Barney, so as a personal request, maybe you might tell me what you're going to do with Lady Day's property.
Well, I'm going to play it, and I'm going to be very ably accompanied by Shelley Mann and Ray Brown, and we do this sort of as a jazz ballad. I'd like to do it for you now.
I once saw a musical called Oklahoma. I think it was the 3rd show on Broadway, not the original, but there was a Surrey in this show, and Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein II had some wonderful ideas about this Surrey, and there was fun connected with it and a different kind of life. What's it doing in the middle of a jazz program, Barney Kessel?
Well, this was done at the insistence of Ray Brown, and he likes to play the melody on this, so when we play it, we give him the melody first, which is a little unusual because usually the bass serves as an accompanist. Here we serve an accompaniment to him.
Here's another kind of music that we're not exactly familiar with. It reminds me of carousels and things like that. I don't know if it has anything to do with that, but the title is The Merry-Go-Round Broke Down, and a couple of fellows I don't know wrote it, Dave Franklin and Cliff Friend. And Barney Kessel, your performance is next, so why don't you give us a few notes on what's going to happen, or maybe we shouldn't know, huh?
Well, I think I'd rather play this and let you draw your own conclusions.
Session with one of America's excellent artists, Barney Kessel, privileged to sit in with you. I don't mean sit in because I feel that I don't even belong here, but as a kind of communicator between listener and musician, I'd like to hear some blues, and this involves your finger style, and I think it's called Barney's Very Own Blues, hyphenated.
That's right. That's right. This was done on Contemporary Volume 2, and this does incorporate the finger style, which is not really my natural way of playing, but
What is your natural way
Well,
of playing?
it's playing with a pick. With a pick. But you see, sometimes when we have an idea, we hear an idea a certain way that we simply have to get the idea out the way we hear it. So even though I don't play with the fingers, this idea calls for the fingers, so I use the fingers.
Is there amplification along with
Yes,
it?
there is,
Do you ever play without your amplifier?
Yes, I do many, many times, but I don't use the electric guitar. I have, actually, I own 12 instruments, and I use what is called as an acoustical guitar, whose wood is very fine, like a fine violin, and I use that. However, it is used mainly to accompany singers, and it's used in orchestras for rhythm.
We'd like to listen to Barney's Blues, so for Monday, here are Barney's Blues. A guitarist sometimes functions like some piano players, and that means that they sublimate themselves and they become a part of the team, and they don't have the stars box, room, or what have you. They're functional, almost music to specification. I guess what I'm leading up to is the fact that pianists and guitarists are accompanists, and very often you'll find them behind singers like, say, Julie London. Barney Kessel, Julie London is something special in the listener's mind, I'm sure. What do you do in an act like that? As if I don't really know.
Well, there's not much I can do, really, in an act like that, but my contribution is musical, I hope, and I did some things with Julie in an album. Among those was a particular number called Cry Me a River, which became a very fine seller, and the album was a very good seller. And what's unusual about it is, Leigh, the fact that Julie and I did an act together with a bass player, and we worked for several months in a club in Hollywood. When we got ready to do the recording, every song that we recorded on the first album that she did for Liberty was done in the act, with the exception of Cry Me a River, which was learned the night that we did the record date. And this is the number that actually came out as being the most popular one, which shows that you can never tell how it's going to end up.
It's something like horses.
It certainly is.
Actually, though, the art of accompanying is something so special that we often overlook what really happens. How do you really compliment a singer?
Well, I think the best way to compliment a singer is at the conclusion of the performance for them to say, "What a wonderful singer." And even if they don't say anything about the guitar, the fact that they can really say something good about the singer, it shows that you've done a good job. Because I think to truly do a good job of accompaniment, you should do everything at your disposal to enhance that singer. You should not take over. You should not be so busy. You should not lead. You should more or less follow. However, you do get some singers, I must say it sometimes, that want to follow. They want you to lead. And so if you get that kind of a singer, you must know that that is expected of you, and you must be the one that you set the tempo. You make the moves and they follow.